are more and more girls who are expressing violence more like boys used to, and it's more acceptable within the culture. So we know that this is a cultural phenomenon. It's not, even though there's some biological givens to how there's a trend to expressing aggression, you can be shaped by your culture to express it any particular way, depending on the culture. So if you see a child sort of dismissing your lessons on how to manage themselves because they have to dismiss you on the way towards deciding about their own gender, then you want to work very hard to make sure they have a model of the gender that they are that acts in the way that you like them to act. Because they're gendering something that shouldn't be gendered. Does that make sense to people? Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
A lot of things get gendered that don't belong in gender. So it's like, jobs aren't really gendered, but we gender them.
Thank you. Our next, we hear so much about today's increased exposure to estrogen and how it is affecting genital development and fertility. Is there information on how female hormones affect gender development?
We know a lot less about that than we know about how testosterone affects gender development. That's because we can really see the big difference that occurs when testosterone is released in fetuses. So we know a lot less about what happens when too much estrogen is given. Some of what you can see is that in boys with androgen insensitivity look like boys who've been exposed to estrogen because they are. All boys have estrogen just like all girls have testosterone. So it's the receptivity to it. So if you're exposed to too much estrogen or estrogen-like hormones, then it is going to affect something about your development. I mean, you may have less hair, for example, during adolescence. You may have a slower rate of production of testosterone and then the growth of sperm later on. That these are some of the effects that may have, but it's hard to say right now because we just don't know enough about how much exposure and what people do with those. And it really varies between people because it depends on their receptivity. That is, you can have the same hormone in two different people and they're going to look different because of the ways they're responsive to that hormone. So one of the things, we know a lot more about women and their hormonal cycles because it's so more evident than we know about men. That's just been a recent area of study about what's the normal testosterone level for men and when does it change and what is the results of the change. Yeah, some of you may have read recently, there's some talk about a male climacteric, that men too go through sort of what's not menopause because it's nothing to do with menstruation, but some version of that later in life, which is often associated with a sense of decreased energy and decreased sexual interest and some depression, which can be treated not with antidepressants but with testosterone. The problem with treating with testosterone is that you stop producing it. If you take it exogenously, if you take it from the outside, you stop making it yourself. So. And some people may have the same level of testosterone but be less responsive to it because their receptors are less sensitive. So the same level of hormone may produce different changes. We just don't know that much. That's the end answer.
All your case examples were boys who have gender conflicts or issues. May we have some girl examples? And then lesbians seem to be so prevalent in urban high schools, ?
No, they're not. That's, it's not true that there's lesbians are so prevalent. What's true is that more people are more willing to say that they're lesbian and gay than they were before. Before that, they were sort of hidden, and so you didn't know it. And more girls and boys are willing to change, are willing to try different things. So I went to a lecture once at a high school. It was given by the GSA at that high school, and the speaker was a gay man who had been mistreated during high school and ended up suing his state and his high school and winning a lot of money. But he had to be withdrawn from the high school because he was physically in danger by going there. And when he spoke, he said, how many in the audience are gay? And a few kids raised their hands. How many of you are lesbians? A few kids raised their hands. And how many of you are bisexual? And they just go raising their hands. And a bunch of the kids were saying they were bisexual. Now, what that means is that they don't know what they are. Essentially, is that they're trying out all different things, and more people are more willing to sort of say that about themselves. I see a kid who tells me he's gay, and I said, "So you ever had sex?" "No." Is it with anybody? "No." I said, "What kind of pornography you look at?" "I like to look at heterosexual pornography." I said, "Okay, well, we'll go with your self determination, but I don't know what that means yet," and he sure doesn't know what it means yet. What was the other part of that question?
Oh, they wanted
Oh, girl
examples
examples,
of
yeah.
girls.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't seen a lot of girls who are transgendered or gender confused at this point. The few that I have seen have been kids with who've ended up being lesbian, but and had some cross-gendered interests and didn't know how to accommodate them into their family. So one woman who was disliked by her mother because her interests were more along the lines of she wanted to work on the garage with her father on the car. And the mother wanted her to come inside, and set the table, and she'd come in all dirty, and the mother would say, "Oh, that's gross, and you shouldn't look like that." And so she felt hated by her mother, and felt that she felt ashamed of herself and the way she looked. But it had nothing, she wasn't really wanting to be a different gender. She wanted to be able to pursue her interests and still feel that she could be liked and loved as she was. So, but the fact is that girls have a lot more range of behaviors and ways of being that are acceptable in the society. So they don't tend to run into as many difficulties as early on. So I don't tend to see them as young. I haven't seen any young girls where the parents are saying, she's too boyish. It's not generally a complaint that parents have. If you go to school and you want to wear jeans all the time, then it's okay, that's fine. It's when they want to go to put on a dress and they scream and yell and carry on that parents begin to get worried. When my oldest daughter was born with really short hair, and when we put her in a dress, she looked, we said, "Oh, you look like a boy in drag." I mean, that's she just looked funny. She had this short little hair and big eyes, and she was more comfortable sort of wearing clothes, but it's nothing. She didn't have a gender problem. It just sort of was a way that she looked in the world and sort of managed herself in the world. So. It's less common in girls than it is in boys. This article I was reading you from is about girls because it's a particular problem in girls' colleges where there's a concentration of sort of people who are trying different ways of gendering themselves. And there's no all-boy colleges where people go there and they want to change genders. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
What if a child doesn't want to be either male or female?
Okay, so that's the question. As I said, it's virtually every child goes through a phase when they want to be both. That is, it's a well-known article in the psychoanalytic literature on the wish to be both sexes. That is, you don't want to give up any of the privileges that you think you ought to have. So a kid who has that wish is somebody who's having a hard time sort of giving up that idea. And what you want to know with that kid is, so what do you think would happen if you were a boy or a girl? I mean, what do you think you wouldn't be able to do if you actually had to settle? As opposed to the boy I was telling you, who said, "I'm both, and I want to have an androgynous look," that teenage boy. And for him, it was a matter, I think, of, I don't know how it would look when his bipolar disorder was treated and how he would want to think about himself. But there are kids who are sort of mixed in how they look. And when they say they want to be both, what they're saying is, I don't want to give up any of the privileges that I think I would lose if I were to determine one or the other. And because they don't want to feel the sadness that's associated with that. And that's a problem that they can get help with. Now, if they want to be a gender that they are and have lots of interests, that's fine. And you have to help them be able to do that.
Okay. Are there more transgendered males than females? And if so, why?
I think people are more familiar with it, and I don't think that it's necessarily true that there's more. And as I say, it's a bigger and bigger phenomenon that there's now women who are in various stages of changing gender. Nobody thinks that they have to, having a penis constructed doesn't really work. So lots of people don't want to give that up. And I don't know if you know, it's in the news about a month ago about the transgendered woman who had her breast removed and then got pregnant because she never had surgery. And then once she got pregnant, she stopped taking the hormones she was taking to virilize her because that would cause some problems for the fetus. So that's a person who wants to have lots of flexibility. But are there more? We're more familiar with them, and in society it's more comfortable, we've sort of seen more images of them. And we know that men have a harder time consolidating their gender than women do. It's a bigger task for them. So that may be one of the reasons that we tend to see them more. And there's more variations. There's cross-dressing, there's transvestites, there's drag queens, but There's all sorts of ranges of men who are trying out different ways of expressing their gender and that we're more familiar with. But I don't know that statistically there's more, unless we look at the idea that men have a harder time sort of consolidating gender.
Okay. At what age do children learn to incorporate psyche and soma into gender sexual identity?
Okay, so go back to that, the developmental test. So 2 and 3, they start sort of labeling themselves boy and girl. 3 to 5, they start limiting. What does that mean that I'm a boy and a girl? By age 6, they pretty much can say, okay, this boy means penis, girl means something else, maybe vagina or being able to have babies. Breasts, it's hard. We have a hard time telling girls what they got than we do with boys. It's sort of we simplify with boys. We don't usually say, oh, you got penis and balls, but that's what they got. I mean, they don't just have penises. But most people don't mention scrotums and testicles, although boys are acutely aware of them and pay a lot of attention to them. Remember my son, when he was playing hockey, he got his first plastic protector. He was loving it. And he was going around, put it on, he was banging himself. Look what I can do. So boys pay a lot of attention, but we don't tend to label them. And for girls, we don't tend to label their genitals at all. So we say boys have penises, girls have, which we should be doing, and helping them sort of identify, what do you got? You got lots of stuff. What do you got? But it's around age 6 that they begin to identify their bodies as being what particular body thing as part of their gender, that it's more consolidated. And then that continues on through adulthood. Doesn't stop.
Okay. What are the theories as to why trauma affects gender identity development?
Well, okay, since gender is a construction, and it occurs within the context of relationships, then any trauma can interfere with that development. I'll give you a good example of that. In my mind, it was a good example. This is a boy who I just really consulted with the parents. I didn't have to see a boy. The mother was a nurse who developed an addiction to drugs. And she had this boy, and they had a caretaker because she worked and the father worked full time. And they had a caretaker. What they didn't know about the caretaker is that the caretaker had some gender identity problems of her own and was very interested in feminizing the boy. So she was like doing secret games with this boy that involved jewelry and dressing up, but telling him to keep it a secret. And then at 18 months, which is a crucial time of development for separation and individuation, for becoming your own person and being able to first separate from your parent, and you need a parent very much around that time around, this mother went into an addiction treatment program. So she was gone for a long, extended period of time, and he was under the care of this woman. So what does that do with a kid? Any kid would have separation problems when they have a terrible separation at a crucial time when they're working on that issue. And for him, given the substrate he was growing up in, that is a woman who sort of did a secret game that was exciting and pleasurable and sort of secret, it became the arena in which he worked out his anxieties about his mother leaving him. She came back and she was profoundly depressed, having, not being liked, being addicted, and having gone through addiction treatment. So she was depressed, thought of herself as an inadequate and unavailable mother, kind of abandoned taking care of him in a way. And so she had a kid who was very anxious. And one of the ways he expressed and managed his anxiety was by, if I dress up, then I feel magic. I got power in these jewels. And these powerful jewels make me feel big and strong. But they're a secret, and they're sort of associated with being a girl. Now, so he came, but the anxiety had a lot to do with bodily anxiety, as we would expect. A kid with separation anxiety has lots of fears about their body. So 4 years old, 5 years old, the father wanted him to learn how to ride a bike, and he was terrified because he thought he was going to get hurt, because he had a lot of bodily concerns which related to separations concerns. So the father gave up. Okay, you're not going to ride a bike? That's it. I'm not going to have anything to do with you. This kid happened to have an artistic temperament, and he loved colors, and he was a great artist at 4 years old. And so what they said is he's misgendered. Now, what really happened is the mother didn't feel adequate as a mother and was withdrawn from him. The father gave up because of his anxiety. When the mother sort of reasserted herself as a mother and they eliminated the disturbed caretaker, and the father understood this kid is just being anxious, I can help him with anxiety, they both felt more competent as parents. And when they worked with him, then he continued to have an artistic interest, but he no longer had to dress up to manage his anxiety. his anxiety was being helped in lots of other ways. So he got over his anxieties about riding a bike.